Hi, everyone. Welcome to this very special, good morning, Justin. Welcome to this very special book launch event that we at L'Arche Daybreak are hosting this morning to celebrate Flying, Falling, Catching, an unlikely story of finding freedom. And this is a book that was co-authored by the late Henry Nouwen and by Carolyn Whitney Brown. And we are really privileged to have Carolyn with us this morning to join with us, to share with us, and to celebrate this wonderful book. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Trish Glennon, and I am the community leader for L'Arche Daybreak. And L'Arche Daybreak was a very special place for Henry. And Henry was very special to our community. So there may be people joining us today who perhaps do not know who we are. So I just want to take a moment to welcome you to L'Arche Daybreak and introduce you to L'Arche Daybreak. We are located in Richmond Hill, Ontario, and we are one of over 150 L'Arche communities around the world. We are the second oldest L'Arche community in the world. And for many years, in the late 80s to the mid 1990s, Henry Nouwen found his home here in our community. We are a community of people with and without disabilities, and relationships across our many differences are core to who we are. And our relationships change us. We are transformed by our relationships through sharing life together in homes, and also through our day programs that make up our community. There's a lot more I could say about L'Arche, but a couple of things. We do take time to celebrate, to live in joy, and to trust in God. These are some of our core values in L'Arche, and these are very much at the heart and spirit of what we are doing this morning at this event together. So welcome to our community. And to begin our time together, we want to take time to offer a land acknowledgement. From the land on which L'Arche Daybreak is located in Richmond Hill, on the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe Nation, in the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations land, we begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands we are on today. I invite all of us to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations, and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Let us take a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and consider how each, in our own way, can live in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. So we'll be together for an hour this morning, and we just ask that you keep your microphones muted. There is a chat feature, so if you'd like to ask a question or offer an appreciation or a comment, please use the chat feature. And I'm going to hand things over to Carl McMillan, who is our MC for this event this morning. Most of us know Carl. Carl is a long-term and faithful community member, especially to the greenhouse here at L'Arche Daybreak. Carl is a former community leader here at Daybreak and is currently working for the L'Arche Canada Foundation. Carl was also a very good friend of Henry Nouwen's. So Carl, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Trish. And welcome to everybody to this book launch for the book Flying, Falling, Catching, co-authored by Henry Nouwen and Carolyn Whitney Brown. Carolyn is with us here today, and I'll introduce her in just a minute. Many of you on this call, I realize, know a lot about Henry already, but we also have some newer people on the call who are just getting to know Henry and his work. So I'll say a word by way of introduction about Henry. Henry was from the Netherlands, where he studied for the priesthood. He knew from a very young age that he wanted to be a priest. And as a young man, he entered the seminary, and in 1957, he was ordained as a Roman Catholic priest. Henry moved to the United States in the mid-1960s for advanced studies in psychology and religion. He went on to teach at the University of Notre Dame, at Yale School of Divinity, and at the Harvard School of Divinity. Henry was, as you can see here, a very electric and enthusiastic teacher. And it was during these university years that Henry first began to write books. Henry became one of the most well-known spiritual writers of his time. He wrote over 40 books. Henry, in 1986, was invited to become the pastor here at L'Arche Daybreak. The year before, he had spent at the L'Arche community in Trolliboy, France. In this picture, you see Henry at the Dayspring Chapel at L'Arche Daybreak, and many of us would go to his Eucharistic service almost every weekday morning that he was here at 8:30, and it was a very intimate little chapel, and as we look back, we always treasure those times together with him. Henry died in 1996, 10 years into his time at Daybreak. Carrie Whitney Brown, I call her Carrie. Her name is Carolyn, but we know her as Carrie here, so I'll slip into calling her Carrie. She, like Henry, is a writer, an author, and a university teacher. In 1990, she joined the Daybreak community with her spouse, Jeff, and their infant daughter, Janet. The couple had 2 more children, Monica and David, during their nearly 7 years at Daybreak. And here you see Jeff and Carrie with their assistant orientation group in that first year in 1990. Carolyn joins us from her home on Vancouver Island, where it is just shortly after 7 a.m. Carolyn, congratulations on the book. Can you share with us a bit about the process of authoring this book with Henry?
Carl, and thank you, everyone. I just want to say that this morning is a kind of dream come true, because I so much wanted readers of this book to have a feeling for this L'Arche community that Henry loved so much. He lived at L'Arche when he experienced meeting the Flying Rodleys. It was home to him. And it's so hard to grasp the energy and spirit of L'Arche if you don't actually have a little bit of an experience. So thanks so much, all of you, for inviting us into this experience today. So I want to take you back to 1991, when Henry, he lived at L'Arche Daybreak, but he traveled a lot. So he was in Germany. He had just finished writing a book about the prodigal son. He was working on a book about being beloved. It became Life of the Beloved. And his dad was visiting him, and he and his father went to see a traveling circus. They went with some friends, and in that circus, he saw a trapeze troupe called the Flying Rodleys, and he was absolutely mesmerized. He just couldn't believe what he saw. He he had a whole body response. He said he felt like an infatuated teenager. He started to weep. It just overwhelmed him. So here is, actually, we're going to play a little bit of the actual act that Henry saw. Rodley Stevens of the Flying Rodleys sent it to me. He said this actually is part of the act that Henry saw himself. So you have to imagine watching this as real people, not just on a little screen, but real human beings. And Henry just couldn't believe what they were doing. Henry said, when I saw the Flying Rodleys for the very first time, it looked like everything that's important in life. I saw it together in one act. The 10-minute act somehow gave me a glimpse of a world that had eluded me so far, a world of discipline and freedom, of diversity and harmony, of risk and safety, of individuality and community, and most of all, flying and catching. And Henry spent the next 5 years of his life trying to figure out how to write about that experience. He became really good friends with the people you see there, the Flying Rodleys trapeze troupe. He even rented a recreation vehicle and traveled with them for a little while. He wanted to figure out how to give readers an experience like he had, not just write a book about it, but write a book that would be a story that would get readers not just explain the meaning of it, but get them on the inside of his own experience of embodiment, of excitement, of playfulness, of thrill. So in 2017, the people at Henry's literary estate asked me if I would take on trying to do something creative with the unpublished pieces, that project that he left behind. And I realized when I read them that I couldn't tell the story Henry would have written. I don't know what book he would have written, but I could tell this great story about Henry and the Flying Rodleys. So just to describe this book, it's in two voices. There's Henry's writing, which is in one typeface, and there's my writing in another typeface. You can really see what's Henry and what's my narration. It reads like a novel, like Henry wanted it to. And sorry, I'm totally distracted watching these beautiful people. I hope you are too. I hope you can hardly concentrate on what I'm saying. There they go. That's Rodley himself. I want to say something about pedestals. When Henry arrived at Daybreak in 1986, he was, as Carl said, a professor from prestigious universities. And he was on a pedestal for a lot of people around the world. They saw him as, a very important person. He was a famous writer. He was a distinguished professor. He was a spiritual master, right? He still gets called that today, a spiritual master. And, being admired that way, being put on a pedestal alone that way was not healthy for Henry. At Daybreak, we didn't really put him on a pedestal because we had to live with him. Now, the circus offers a different kind of image of a pedestal. And I'm going to show you something else here. Did you see that trapeze performers use pedestals a lot? To take off from, return to, and receive applause, but they're never there alone, and they don't stay there for long. So here is Henry on a pedestal. There he is, on a circus pedestal with his friends. You see, the story is about what we do together, how we support each other to do things together that we never would have done alone. So notice Henry's not alone. In fact, real friends will throw you off the pedestal. Here he goes. You see, at Daybreak, Henry often felt insecure and incompetent. As I said, we didn't put Henry on a pedestal, we couldn't. living with him wasn't always easy. He was a demanding friend. He was a demanding colleague. We all had to set boundaries and learn how to say no to his requests sometimes. But it was also really, really fun living with Henry. Life in community isn't always easy, but it is so satisfying. Here's Henry receiving applause. You see, Henry reveled in community life. I just really want you to get a feel for Henry's joy, his playfulness, his excitement. And that's what he found in the circus world too, and at Daybreak, this sense of excitement, of playing. And so as I immersed myself in his writing about the Flying Rodleys and the world of the traveling circus, I could really see why the trapeze grabbed him as both a real experience, seeing them, and also as a kind of image and metaphor of life together, of trying to figure things out, of getting it right, of getting it wrong. Do you hear everyone laughing at Henry as he figures out how to run around on a trampoline here? Life in community, we laughed at each other, we laughed with each other. It was just a joyful, joyful time, not every moment, but often. So now we're going to explore what flying, falling, and catching meant to Henry. And I'm going to hand it back over to Carl.
Thanks so much, Carrie, and thank you for that great footage. It really puts us into the circus tent with Henry. When we were planning how to do this book launch on Zoom, we actually turned to a format that was very familiar to Henry and that he often used when he was planning a public talk. What he would do in his teaching and in his public lectures was to take the subject and to divide it into three parts, three little subsections. And in between and before he began, he would teach his audience a little song. And they would sing that song in between each of the three sections. So we are using that form as we do our book launch today. Now, very conveniently, the title of the book is three words: flying, falling, catching. So those are our three subtitles, if you will, or three parts or three rings of the circus. So each will begin with some music, with a song. You're going to learn the song in just a moment with some gestures. And that will be followed by a reading, a passage from the book read by someone from L'Arche Daybreak. And then there will be a reflection on the subject for that section. And then it will repeat itself: the music, the reading, the reflection, the music, the reading, the reflection. So that's how it's structured. We're going to turn now to our musicians and movement leader. We have Henry Thiessen and his brother Wesley and his father Wyndham as our musicians. They are coming to us live today from Saskatoon. And Bonnie, who you see on the left here, Bonnie Parsons is the leader of the Spirit Movers, L'Arche Daybreak's liturgical dance troupe. Bonnie will teach us the gestures to go along with the song, and while doing, she will introduce the lyrics. Don't worry too much about the lyrics because you'll see those on screen when we actually are doing our singing. So Bonnie, please take it away.
Gestures Jubila te Deo, Jubila te Deo, Alleluia. Jubila te Deo, Jubila te Deo. Alleluia.
Great, thank you, musicians and Bonnie. And so now we have the music and we have the gestures, we have the song, and now we'll sing it together for 3 verses as we begin our first ring. The first ring is flying. Patrick Cronin from L'Arche Daybreak's greenhouse is the reader. Patrick, please go ahead.
The flying Warwick has given Henry an image for the art of risk and trust that is the shape of each human life. Ultimately, each person belongs to God and will return to God. But flying is done together as a troop of human beings. I was fascinated by their dedication, by their discipline, by the way they work together, by their kindness to each other, by the whole way in which they did things.
Thank you, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
So this section on flying, it comes after you've seen the trapeze artists at work in the tent, up on their pedestals and flying through the air. Each person in the trapeze troupe has a very specific role, and the flyer is in a very critical role. The flyer is the trapeze artist who flies through the air and just waits to be caught by the catcher. As Henry learned about the trapeze troupe, he was very interested to hear how this group, this little community of people, worked together so closely, and how they were able to create such beautiful artistry in midair. The flyer, he learned, must never try to catch the catcher. The flyer has let go, the flyer is midair, and the flyer, although he extends his arms to be received by the catcher, he has to stay loose and free. If the flyer tries to catch the catcher, to grab him, he could easily break his wrists or break the wrists of the catcher. So it's really important that the flyer actually do nothing and just wait to be caught. And this was a very powerful image that you'll hear more about as we continue with the book launch. Here you see some images of Henry at Daybreak, where Henry was very much at home. And it's very interesting to many people that Henry, after decades in academia, chose a community to live where many people don't read, but people at L'Arche Daybreak just adored Henry. Core members in particular really appreciated his sense of humor and his interest in them. Here he is at our corner house, one of our community homes, where on Tuesday afternoons he would do a Eucharist just for a small group in the home. And this is Henry in the midst of the group, the whole community. I think we were on a community weekend, and it's not a very big community. It was a little over 100 people, and Henry was the pastor and very much at the center, and very, very beloved member of our community. Here is Henry again in the Dayspring Chapel, and we still have that tapestry that came from, it was a gift from his father. It's in our current chapel today, but there we were often in a circle, singing and clapping and moving together. So when Henry came to Daybreak, he lived in a Daybreak home, and he became very good friends with one of his housemates, Adam Arnett. Adam was almost the antithesis of a trapeze artist. He was a man of great vulnerability. His body was very troubled by seizures almost every day. He needed a lot of help with lots of things. And Henry learned his daily routines. And he would often do his morning routine with Adam. And Henry, who was generally going 100 miles an hour, had to slow down for Adam because Adam was moving at one speed. It was very slow. And he later wrote that Adam was one of his greatest teachers. And Adam knew how to fly. Adam was an expert in trust. And Henry, of course, came to really revere Adam. And one of his last books was Adam, the Beloved. At Henry's birthday, his 60th birthday, we decided to do a birthday party for him with a circus theme. And we have a clip here to share with you. And it's a clip where you'll see Henry being reborn as a baby clown.
To sit right here. Yes. Now, to begin your life as a clown, you have to go right back to the very beginning, okay? This is a clown egg. No? We used to have chickens on the farm here? Yeah. This is an egg. But a little baby chick will come out, a baby clown will come out of this egg, okay? So you are going to come inside this, and you have to realize that when you're in there, do you know the passage about being knitted in your mother's womb? That's what's going to happen to you inside this egg. You're going to be knitted together like a baby clown. baby clown may need some help here. Does anybody want, Lisa, do you want to come and help?
Yeah.
Three. Henry, all of these people are more than just your friends. Henry the baby clown, this is your family. This is your family, and these people all love you. And you'll discover that you love them. And you can love them.
Kim Laguerre, a member of L'Arche Daybreak and of the Spirit Movers, will do the reading for this section, Falling.
Okay. And posture. And possibly what changed at Daybreak was that Henry felt supported enough to finally reach facing this side of himself. Like a tampy at Daybreak and his new friends gave him a place where he could finally fall. And unexpectedly, a key part that safely net was Adam. In this loving, caring Maru, without competition, went up manship and great pressure to distinguish myself, I experienced what I had not been able to see or experience before. I was faced with insecure, needy, and fragile person myself.
Thank you, Kim. And Mary, let me introduce you. Mary is a long-time member of the L'Arche Daybreak community, an author, writer, and spiritual director. Mary will lead this reflection on falling.
Thanks, Carl. So one of the beautiful things about living or working in the L'Arche community is that you can be yourself. You don't need to perform or impress people or pretend you're someone you're not. You can simply be yourself. There's a wonderful spirit of welcome and acceptance in L'Arche that comes from the core members and flows into the whole community. It's a place you can let down your defenses and gradually discover who you really are, discovering gifts and capacities you never knew you had, and also getting in touch with shadow parts of yourself, which can be quite unsettling. In the intensity of relationships and roles in community, I may discover I feel insecure in front of certain people, or jealous, or resentful. I discover I can be impatient, or mean, or controlling. I shared a room with an 18-year-old assistant when I lived at L'Arche Edmonton, who had been the big sister in a happy family. And she said, I never knew I had a temper until I came to L'Arche. And that was Henry's experience too. As he settled into L'Arche Daybreak, he found in Adam a source of peace and steadiness that required him to slow down and allowed him to get in touch with aspects of himself he'd never acknowledged before. As we saw in the quote that Kim just read, he writes, I was faced with a very insecure, needy, and fragile person myself. We can understand the experience of falling as falling off a pedestal. I'm no longer the fine, generous person I thought I was. Henry was no longer the sought-after professor or famous writer. At the new house, Raymond or Adam knew nothing about his books and reputation. While that was freeing, it was also unsettling for Henry. Who was he now? Falling may also be considered falling apart, which was true for Henry. He got to the point where he couldn't function anymore. He writes, I found myself overwhelmed by intense feelings of abandonment, rejection, neediness, dependence, and despair. Here I was in the most peaceful house with the most peaceful people, but raging inside myself. Falling may also be seen as falling into the abyss, hoping that you're falling into the arms of love. That kind of falling takes tremendous trust and courage. And that was Henry's experience too. He found a place in Winnipeg where he could fall, a safe place where wise people listened to him and welcomed and accepted him in his brokenness and pain. It was a very important experience in his journey, and it was a turning point. At that time, Henry had begun working on a book about the prodigal son. Initially, he identified strongly with the resentful, dutiful elder brother. This experience of falling drew him to identify with the younger son, who finds himself in the pigsty, miserable, hungry, and alienated from his home. And during this time, Sister Sue Mosteller visited him. And as a true friend, she challenged Henry and said, Henry, we need you to be the father. That was a turning point. Henry came back to the community and he did become the father. His experience of falling launched him into a period of great fruitfulness in his own life and in the life of L'Arche Daybreak. He had discovered a new freedom, which was celebrated a few years later in Daybreak's gala to mark our 25th anniversary in a song called Bound to Fail. In it, Henry and Sue sing about a secret they have discovered. The words of the song say, we are bound to fail, but not bound by failure. It's the secret that can set our poor hearts free. So let's watch a clip from that gala performance and appreciating that this freedom came out of an experience of falling.
Too tired looking. This is Sue Mosteller, Henry now, and they look like they've been on the trail too long, folks.
As we walk that slippery road,
with holes and bumps and mud,
we wonder if we ever will
escape the desperate run.
Failure, our destiny,
Road to a lonely grave.
but in spite of all our misery, we have survived.
'Cause we know a secret.
The theme for this third ring is catching. Jason Klinker, a Daybreak member who is on the Woodery team, will do the reading. Jason, please go ahead.
Okay. Their struggle to get it right struck something deep in Henry. Not just the swing of the flyer, but the flyer and catchers whirling together, their momentum and energy feeding off of each other. The soaring flyer had faith that the catcher would grab them to renew their momentum, then launch them onward to the next catcher. Trust and risk in continued motion together.
Carolyn Whitney Brown, the co-author of the book, will lead this final ring.
As Jason just read, catching isn't the end point. Henry loved that image of how the flyer just has to reach out and trust and not try to grab the catcher. The flyer does their tricks and then they just stretch out and reach, and the catcher is the one who's actually paying attention to absolutely everything. The catcher is watching whether they're fast, whether they're slow, whether they're high, whether they're low, and is figuring out, making micro adjustments at every moment to catch that person coming at them. And Henry loved the intimacy of being caught, the idea of being caught by someone who's paying that close attention. But also he just loved that that's not the end point. They don't, the catcher doesn't catch the flyer and stop midair. The catcher picks up momentum and sends the flyer on, and he just loved the dynamics of that. Also, there's not just one catcher. The troop had 2 catchers and 3 flyers. It's a collaborative thing. It's a collective. It's a community experience of discipline and attention. And as I thought about it, so here's one of the flyers and catchers. And Henry was also fascinated that the catcher is hardly noticed. The catcher does their job beautifully, but everyone's watching the flyer the whole time. And he thought of the catcher as God, who catches us at the end of our lives, but also the catcher as each other, our neighbor, our friends, how we catch each other, how sometimes we miss each other. Sometimes we have to know that, we're paying attention and we can't catch that person. We've got to let them go into the net, and that will be okay too. So accepting that you do your best, you pay attention, and sometimes you don't catch. In all those ways, Henry loved this image. And what really struck me thinking about it in terms of our community life was something we learned from Henry. We learned a lot about blessing each other, of taking time to pay attention to each other, and then to pause and even lay hands on each other and bless each other with momentum to our next thing. So our next slide, you'll see at Daybreak, Henry really taught us to bless each other, and we did it all the time. We blessed people and sent them out into their next act, into their next momentum, in all sorts of ways. I just have so many memories. remembering blessing and sending one of Daybreak's early members, Helen Humphreys, when she became so ill, she was going to have to go live in the hospital. And we blessed her to be a blessing herself to everyone she was going to meet in those last few months of her life. We blessed Xenia and sent her to Ukraine, where she met people with disabilities and their families and started communities in Ukraine. We blessed all sorts of people in the community for their ministries. The next slide shows a blessing. Our little daughter Monica needed heart surgery when she was born, and the community all blessed her and sent her. And here's a picture of Henry catching her after she returned from her successful heart surgery. Take up the next slide. And actually, that's Janet now being blessed at a baptism. We baptized babies. And Henry, of course, we blessed him like mad because he left and went out on new adventures all the time. So it seems like we are continually blessing and sending Henry himself. And here he is being caught by his friends, the Flying Rodleys. And what he said about the Flying Rodleys themselves, he said, you know, in this world where there is so much division, where there is so much separation and so much violence, the Rodleys, in a way, are peacemakers. They create community. They create something that the world so badly needs. Henry cared passionately about peacemaking in the world, about how we build a better, kinder way of living together, what's possible, how we develop the spiritual maturity to live together, to create something beautiful in the world together. That really, really was so important to Henry. So we can go to the next slide. I just want to conclude with something Henry said. Henry said, when I think about Circus Barroom, which is the traveling circus that the Flying Rodleys were in, when I think about Circus Barroom and L'Arche Daybreak, I think of two international communities of people who want to bring joy and peace to the world. I'm just going to say it again. When I think about Circus Barroom and L'Arche Daybreak, I think of two international communities of people who want to bring joy and peace to the world. As Henry said, in this world of so much division and violence, we just don't have to be alone. All around us are communities committed to peace building, to building bridges, to loving each other with open hearts. And I just want to say too, just in thanks today to Daybreak for letting us feel this experience together, that L'Arche all over the world is building bridges of peace and goodwill among people. I'm thinking of L'Arche in Palestine, in Haiti, in the Ivory Coast, in the US. Right now, especially powerful in Ukraine, in Poland, where they're welcoming an enormous number of people with disabilities and their families who've had to flee their homes, and L'Arche is opening its home and just trying to help people travel. And so as we end today, I just really want to encourage you to support L'Arche in friendship, in prayer. Financially, you can find L'Arche International, L'Arche Canada, L'Arche Daybreak online. It's a way of living in the world. A peacemaker, John Deere, once said to me that he said, well, we're trying to dismantle the violence of the world, but once we do that, we have to figure out how to live together afterwards. And he said a community like L'Arche is starting to try to find and bumble its way towards how do we live better together. So thank you, L'Arche, for giving us this experience today. And just to really wrap up our L'Arche experience, I want to conclude with opening our hearts with all the goodwill and the kind of L'Arche energy and spirit that delighted Henry. So in the spirit of Henry and of L'Arche, a place where Henry could be silly, where he could dance, I want to for our grand finale, to introduce Brandon Zach. And we have asked Brandon to lead us in the chicken dance. So, okay, everybody, get ready to dance. Brandon, you ready?
Well, thank you, Brandon, for that great ending. And thank you, Carrie, for this beautiful book. Thanks all of you for being part of this book launch today. The book itself is available at your local library, in your local bookstore, and available from online booksellers. So I hope you'll all have a chance to read it soon. Thanks again. And to you, Trish.
So I just want to give a big thank you to all the people who helped bring this event together. We had a little committee of people, so I just want to highlight who that was. So a big thank you to Clara, and especially to Carl and Mary. I want to give a shout out to our musicians who came live from Saskatoon. So Henry and Wyndham. To Bonnie for the dance, Patrick, Kim, and Jason for reading for us today, Brandon for sharing your gift of dance and your love of the chicken dance. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today from all over. Thank you for being with us. And thank you again to you, Carolyn, for writing this wonderful book and for sharing Henry's gift with us. Thank you, everyone. So I wish everyone a great day. If you want, you can unmute and say goodbye to each other.
Lizzie,
Bye.
don't say it, please.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
say
Bye,
something.
everyone.
Great to see those old videos.
Hello.
And you helped me
Daybreak
too.
history.
Hello.
Guided you.
Thank you.
Stay with me.
Really helped. You did everything on me.
I said, stay with me. Hello.
Hey, Daryl.
Stay with me.
Hey, my brain. Hey,
Here's Daryl. I said, stay with me.
Luigi.
No, I said, stay with me.
Yeah.